So to start this conversation, Nelson, I think it would be very helpful for our audience to give you a little bit of figures about the oil and gas industry and its importance in the Brazilian energy landscape. So currently, the oil and gas industry is responsible for providing reliable and affordable energy, basically being responsible for half of the primary energy demand in Brazil, for providing 50% of the energy primary demand in Brazil, which is so absolutely relevant to keep cars going on, even during the pandemic crisis, to providing energy to hospitals, to basic services that cannot be interrupted even during the crisis. It is also responsible for supporting about almost 10% of the industrial GDP of Brazil, which is, of course, home and supporting every other economic activity that relies on energy density. So having said that, and of course, Decio will explore this in much more detail, we have to acknowledge that the oil and gas industry has been a very vibrant one in Brazil recently due to all the regulatory advances that have been implemented in the last at least 3 to 4 years. And so Brazil has been room to almost $100 billion of investment in the oil and gas industry in the last 5 years. If we come up to the last 10 years, then we'll have figures amounting to $250 billion invested in Brazil. So this is to say that this industry is relevant, is important, is home to jobs, to creating technology, to contributing to taxes, government taxes, and all other positive economic impacts that it has on the national economy. So it is absolutely key to keep an attractive environment so that business can be really can be developed here in Brazil in a predictable and a safe way. And I mean safe both in terms of energy standards and environmental standards, of course, but also in terms of legal standards and I would say the necessary ease of doing business that we need to keep attracting this volume of investments, even though we are to face a much more severe price environment in the near future. So I'd like to hand it over to Decio because I understand that this is much more a conversation than only one person having the floor. And I'll come back to you, Narciso, with regard to the question around energy transition and the development of renewable energy after Decio's comments, okay?
Thank you, Clarissa. It's a pleasure to be here with you, with Narciso, with Jeremy. But I couldn't start before saying that I'm very glad to see that the Institute was able to organize the conference, even in those very difficult times of the pandemic. I don't remember when was the first time I went to La Jolla for a conference, maybe it's back 20 years. So I would like to congratulate Jeremy, Ted, and all the team from the Institute for being able to put all this effort in order to organize this very unique conference, and it's a pleasure to be here. I remember last time I was there in 2017, I promised Jeremy I would be there in 2020. I couldn't imagine it would be this in this form, but it's really a pleasure to join again. When the pre-salt was discovered more than 10 years ago, a lot of excitement happening in Brazil, and we lost a lot of time as well in order to develop it. And in 2014, 2015, the country entered into a very big recession, the largest recession ever until now. GDP went down by 80%, and the oil industry faced its most important crisis. A conjunction of factors caused that crisis. First, the concentration of operations in Petrobras. Then the Petrobras corruption scandal, we call it Operation Car Wash, that revealed a series of malpractices in the industry in Brazil. And eventually, when the oil price went down in 2014, 2015, we collapsed. So by 2016, 17, the new government, after the president was impeached, the new government decided to stimulate the industry and to take a series of measures in order to make it easier for investors to come back to Brazil. And during a very short period of time, we were very active in changing some rules in Brazil, and I could say that we were successful in that effort. We had some bidding rounds between 2017 2019, very successful in terms of attracting companies and investments. About $30 billion in signing bonus, very, very relevant. More than 90% of all signing bonus collected worldwide in that period. And when Brazil was preparing to become, using the richness of the pre-salt, to become one of the 5 most relevant oil producers in the world in the next decade, we are now facing this pandemic. When the recovery was picking up in Brazil, we faced this crisis. And I believe that we may see some delays in actions and investments, and some plans will be adapted, but the resources are there, and I think those investments will come. And so Elizabeth is joining us now. Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome. So I think that we'll do our homework once more, and Brazil will be home of a lot of investments in the years to come.
Nelson, I'm not sure if you're frozen for everybody. For me, yes. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Is it frozen?
Is it frozen?
Yes, I think.
But we can hear you.
But is it frozen? Is it frozen?
Yes.
I can assure you that I'm not frozen here.
It's a little chilly in Maryland.
We might have some problem between the computer and the chair, but I don't know how to fix it.
Well, so do you want us to continue the answering? So we had the first part of the question.
Because I'm seeing you. I'm okay here. So are you guys hearing me?
Yeah.
Can you guys see me?
Yes.
So
yeah.
we can keep going because I can see and hear all of you.
Very good.
Do you want me to jump in first, Decio?
Yes, I definitely continue.
Okay, so I only ask you guys to put on mute, otherwise there's a background noise, an echo. So thank you. So the first part of the question, Nelson, I think really shows that there's a lot of potential, a lot of investment keep going here to Brazil, and of course, but we rely on a stable and predictable investment environment to really secure and make sure that these investments will be deployed in a profitable way in Brazil, even though we face the prices at the level as they are now. And I'm sure we'll come back to pre-salt afterwards. When it comes to energy transition, my understanding, and at CEBRI, we have developed what we call our vision for the future of energy in Brazil. What we see is a country that has all the conditions to deploy several and a diverse set of energy sources in a profitable manner in Brazil. So what we are really looking for is to Brazil to be seen as a strong and very relevant player in the energy landscape globally, thanks to its competitive advantages in many energy sources. Therefore, we understand that the energy transition is on its way. It might be delayed, investments might be postponed and delayed due to, I would say, the lack of available financial resources during this crisis. But we really don't envision any reverse course on the trend that is set to decarbonize the energy sources, I would say, generally speaking. So, and Brazil has shown that it is competitive when it comes to wind, when it comes to solar, to biomass, or to hydro energy, of course, which is at the very core of our power mix in Brazil, even as it is today. I would say that the trend for more investment in renewable energy is here to stay, even though we will have, generally speaking, less financial resources to invest in all our sources. But that's why Brazil is privileged in terms of investment, I would say, forecast, as it is to attract both interest from oil and gas industry, but also from all the renewable players as well.
Thank you very, very much, Clarissa, for the very detailed response. Decio, would you like to add anything on this transition?
Oh, yes. I would like to say that, as always I agree with Clarissa on her views. But what we see is that this crisis we are facing now, can you please mute your... what I see now is companies, especially the European leaders, focusing more in trying to be carbon neutral in 2050. I think this will make an impact on investments in the years to come.
Okay, Decio. Let me, Elizabeth, be very welcome to our webinar here. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I'd like to pose very specific questions to you.
Okay.
We know that the United States and Brazil has signed an agreement. I'd like to know what the status of the Brazil-US Energy Forum and the bilateral energy relationship. What are the goals and principal areas of focus of this agreement?
Thanks, Nelson. And sorry it took me a while to figure out getting in here. So the agreement was something that started back in March 2019. And I don't know if somebody is not on mute, but there's definitely an echo.
Malcolm has to be on mute, otherwise there's an echo.
Huh?
Elizabeth, keep going, please.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was the Bolsonaro administration has been very easy to work with. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone from the United States perspective. We had some engagement with Brazil prior to the Bolsonaro administration, but things have significantly stepped up, particularly since March of 2019 when our two presidents met. At the time they launched the U.S.-Brazil Energy Forum. We call it US-BEF. I know that sounds a lot like my name. I joke around, but I didn't name it. The White House did. But it's taken off, and we've actually been doing work since 2019, although Energy Secretary Briette and Minister Bento were not able to meet until February. So we had actually a wonderful bilateral meeting between our two governments, and I would like to highlight that on both sides, it is not only the Department of Energy or MME on the Brazilian side that engaged, but this is across all parts of our two governments. And we also have a pillar for engaging the private sector in this particular forum. So we had great meetings in February, and then we moved into COVID. So unfortunately, but I will tell you that things continue, and I will highlight now the areas that we've agreed to work on and what might be some specific things that we've done, just so that you get an idea of what the exchange is like. One of the first pillars is a pillar looking at oil and gas and trying to improve the environmental practices in exploration, production, and also decommissioning of old wells. These are things that both sides agreed to work on. We've actually already held quite a few webinars and training sessions with our Department of Interior colleagues, Boehm and Bessie, that actually oversee the offshore and the onshore drilling of U.S. U.S. Government-owned resources, which actually there's quite a bit of drilling on U.S.-owned land out in the west of the United States. And so they have a lot of expertise. The aim has been to streamline, to share best practice so that we can learn from each other, and particularly so that Brazil can streamline and improve the environmental licensing process that we currently have now. So we're working with IBAMA on that. So that's another interagency example of on the Brazilian side. And we are also starting a new program of work on offshore oil and gas decommissioning, which has been requested. And I think will be something we'll be able to continue to move forward on, even if, particularly if we see declines in demand. This will still be a good area for us to work together on. We also have a lot of expertise in the Department of Interior on that issue. Well, we're asked to work on cybersecurity with Brazil. In the oil and gas industries, this is something that my department here in the United States is responsible for. We also work with the Commerce Department, and we have held several events, trainings. We've had to put a little bit on hold the trainings we do out of the embassy in Brazil, in Brasilia and Rio, the consulate, because of COVID. But once that gets up back, once we're able to have larger groups come in, again, we will continue that work on cybersecurity. We're also working on promoting competitive natural gas market in Brazil, something we talked to Decio about a year and a half ago when we visited. It's very important to us and to Brazil. In particular, we have engaged FERC, which is our energy regulator that covers electricity and natural gas in the United States. Obviously, we have had an explosion of natural gas production and transportation in the United States and utilization. The FERC is very up to speed on the market system in the United States. And so we will be working very closely. We will be bringing a team of our regulators down to Brazil as soon as we can travel again. It was supposed to happen this month. And they will be sitting down and sharing their expertise and building connections and technical assistance with their counterparts in Brazil. This was a big ask on the Brazilian side. Also in the gas area, we're actually going to be moving forward on looking at compressed natural gas vehicle utilization in Brazil in heavy duty vehicles. It's something that our department does a lot of work on. And so we're looking forward to do further work on CNG utilization in Brazil so that they can, because of the transportation emissions and also utilization of gas as increasing gas is coming in. We did quite a lot of work on nuclear. I think that's a little bit unique to my department. The Department of Energy has a strong nuclear mandate based on the history of our department in the United States. As you know, Minister Bento comes from the Navy and the nuclear side of the Navy. So he's very interested in restarting the nuclear program in Brazil. And so when we were down in February with the secretary, we also participated in a trade mission that was organized by NEI, which is a U.S. private sector group. And we talked a lot about potential for civil nuclear expansion in Brazil. This is the completion of Angra 3, which is a half-built nuclear reactor that Brazil has. Brazil has 3 reactors right now. And the extension of the life of Angra 1, which is the first reactor built. And Westinghouse will be doing some of that work. So we were able to kind of move that forward at that time. We are also cooperating with them on technical assistance and training in small modular reactors, which is an area where they're also very interested. And then the last item is on the electricity grid modernization, integration of renewables like solar and wind, and also demand side management. These are all issues that various sectors of the Brazilian government are interested in, and so we will be doing a series of webinars with NRail, which is one of our laboratories that specializes in renewable energy out of Colorado. And we will be doing a variety of trainings and presentations on grid modernization and demand response in particular. And then finally, we are going to restart some industrial energy efficiency work that we had been doing previously with Brazil. We're doing this with CNI. Again, this is an association of industrial private sector partners. And we are looking to do a visit as soon as we can travel again to share the expertise that we have in the United States and in our building, and a program that we have called Better Plants, which is looking at basically industrial energy efficiency in plants. So we hope to continue. It's a very busy agenda. I only kind of brushed across a few examples of things we're doing. We're doing many things in the different work streams. And I'd just like to highlight again, it's not just the Department of Energy, it's also the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, our Trade Development Agency, the former Exim Bank, which is now the Development Credit Agency, and AID are all working on this as well.
Elizabeth, thank you very much for the very comprehensive and complete response. I'd like to take part of speech of Clarissa and Decio, especially regarding the very high investment that the foreign companies did in Brazil a couple of years ago during the bid rounds. So my questions are, does the current scenario impact the mandatory investment taken by oil companies in the pre-salt blocks acquiring that recent, bidding rounds? Do you believe that, that the situation that we are facing today are going to be detrimental in any aspects to the company to make what they said that they would be during the bid rounds? I will open that.
You want to answer my that? No.
Say that again?
You want me to answer that?
I'm sorry, I did not get you.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please, go.
No.
Nelson, can you mute your mic? Otherwise, we can hear the others.
Okay. Well, when companies, they participate in bidding rounds in Brazil, they normally pay a signing bonus for the blocks, either in the concession regime or the production sharing regime. And they commit to a certain number of activities, seismic jobs, wells. And in order to comply with the regulations, they give the government guarantees. So if they do not complete the minimum working program, they have their guarantees executed. But the guarantees and the minimum working program are really minimal. They do not represent the investment that we expect companies to develop in those prolific areas they have acquired in Brazil. So what we believe is that in this very first moment, in the very deep crisis that we are facing now, companies are discussing investments that are cutting costs, but in the mid to long run, normality resumes, and we will see all those investments coming back. We have in our contracts about 7 years for exploration. So I think that's enough time for companies to resume normality and to continue the investment.
Thank you, Des. Clarissa, you'd like to comment on it?
Yeah, there's a background noise So sorry about that. And again, Nelson, you can mute your mic, otherwise there's an echo. So that's part of Brazilian reality, you know. There's someone, you know, selling articles passing by. So it's part of our conversation as well. Nelson, I'd like to add a few comments on what Decio has mentioned, but really highlighting, I would say, the competitiveness of the pre-salt, of the Brazilian pre-salt. Because when we look at the productivity that has been obtained after years of investment in technology, but also after years of improving our business environment, then we'll come to the conclusion that the pre-salt is one of the most competitive current play in the oil and gas global landscape. And it has to keep its competitiveness by improving whatever can be improved in terms of regulatory conditions to keep attracting the investments that has been able to do so in the last years. So it is really our strong belief at CEBRI Energy Program that Brazil has all the conditions to keep attracting foreign direct investment in the oil and gas industry, but also be a safe place to be in a reliable place and profitable one for the deployment of the oil and gas industry. Just to illustrate this issue, we have some data that show that pre-salt break-even currently is below $30 a barrel. So this is, I would say, very important when we understand that companies have to be very careful in cash management and in cash preservation. So being an operator in Brazil, in these productive area in Brazil, even at the current Brent prices, is something that could be profitable. And if we believe that it is, these prices is one very important, very severe, but that the environment might change in, let's say, 2 years frame, then be well placed in Brazil is an advantage for the companies that have already acquired some very productive areas in the last bid rounds. And just for you to have an idea, Brazil, the oil and gas industry has attracted 1/5 of the foreign direct investment in the very recent years. So this is a clear signal that we are competitive, and we have to keep our competitiveness at a global scale.
Thank you, Clarissa. Let me get back to Elizabeth now. Elizabeth, do you believe the U.S. will work with the Brazilian government to provide foreign aid direct at recovery in the energy sector? Do you believe they're going to have direct?
So actually, I'd also like to comment on the last question a little bit, because I feel like while things are at a pause right now in terms of the pre-salt auctions, I think we view this, there's the silver lining to this, is that this time period provides an opportunity for the Brazilian government and those of us that work with the Brazilian government, whether it's the United States or other countries or other multilaterals, to help the Brazilian government continue to make its sector even more attractive, as Clarissa was saying. So this is an opportunity for us to continue to forward our work that we're doing with Brazil, to make these auctions even more attractive when they come back in the next year, and to work with them. There are also several proposals before the legislature in Brazil right now that might make it a more attractive investment, including removing production sharing requirements and some of the other preferences that favor Petrobras, we might see movement, and we might see a change in direction, or not in general direction, but we might see this sector become even more attractive. And so we view this pause, if you want to call it, as a great opportunity to continue to work with Brazil, and to work with our companies in the United States, because we want to see U.S. companies participating in these bid rounds. They certainly participated in the early ones a few years ago. There was not as great a participation in the last round, and we want to make sure that U.S. companies are as engaged as they were before or more. So that's one comment on that. In terms of direct assistance, I think what you'll see in Brazil is a continued interest from the Development Credit Authority, which is the new OPIC, with Exim for investment in the country. In terms of direct financial assistance, I think I'm not sure that that's exactly what Brazil needs, but I think continuing to try to support investment and development in the country and technical assistance will continue, and perhaps even grow as we move out of the COVID and into the next phase.
Thank you. Let's speak a little bit about gas, specifically about the new gas market. Before it stalled in the Congress, significant progress had made on implementing a new natural gas market aimed at creating an open and competitive gas market. What can be done to recover that effort and accelerate its implementation? How does the industry intend to convince the political authorities that it is necessary to continue the process? I would like to hear both Decio and Clarissa, if you can, please.
Shall I start?
You start there?
I can start. A lot of progress was made on this regard during the past few years. We now have in place an agreement between Petrobras and CADE, which is our antitrust regulatory agency, that determines that Petrobras shall divest from a series of assets in the natural gas space, and also to give access to other companies for essential facilities. And this is happening very fast. We are seeing this happening now. Every day we see developments. Natural gas price in Brazil is going down. It's a very good news. And what's necessary now for this move to be completed is the approval of the new gas bill, which is in Congress. It's supposed to be voted soon, and I believe as soon as the Congress resumes operating normally after the pandemic impact, I think it's a priority. And as soon as we get that done, we will see the regulatory changes improving in time, and natural gas market in Brazil will be different, open, diverse, and competitive.
Yes, and to echo Decio's comment, I want to reinforce that there is a bill to be voted. It was supposed to be voted just prior to the carnival, and then after carnival, it was COVID. So unfortunately, this has not happened. Nonetheless, the government has set it as a priority. And there's also a very, I would say, transparent dialogue between the industry and Congress, reinforcing the importance of having these law approved. Having said that, there are lots of things going on at the state levels in Brazil. So you might not be aware of, but the distribution of gas in Brazil is a monopoly at the state levels, although the federal government has a very clear role to implement, I would say, the overall reform, the overall gas reform. But at the state levels, there are lots of things that can be done. Basically implementing also legislation and setting up clearer rules when it comes to trading of gas, which is an activity that requires regulation at the state level, and differentiating it from the distribution of gas. And this is happening. So we have a couple of states already advancing regulatory legislation that are a showcase that gas has a lot to be developed in Brazil, and there is a very, I would say, fertile room to develop this industry as an industry in itself when it comes to this competition, very healthy competition between states going on. So this is happening even during the COVID crisis.
It's very good to hear that. And the gas is absolutely mandatory and necessary for our industry at this point in time. I have another question. For this one, I really like to listen to our three panelists. It is about renewables. With the demand for resources, what is the outlook for renewables? Will they lose strength? What about the broader element of energy transition in Brazil, such as grid modernization and digitalization, as well as distributed energy? What about nuclear energy? I'd like to start by Clarissa. Then Decio, I'm going to give a priority to the ladies, Clarissa, then Elizabeth, and let's close it up.
Thank you, Narciso, for your question. As I briefly mentioned in another response, wind, solar, biomass sources, energy sources in Brazil are set to grow in our energy mix. For those who are not aware, the renewable sources, already accounts for between 40 to 45% of the Brazilian energy mix today, which is where I would say the great majority of the countries would very much like to be in 20 or 30 years' time. We are already there. So we already count on a very strong renewable base in Brazil, coupled with a very strong oil and gas base in Brazil, which makes Brazil a very unique place when it comes to its energy profile. And as mentioned by Elizabeth, our current minister comes from the nuclear industry. So, and he has a word to say when it comes to I would say, carbon energy source. And then nuclear is very tiny part of our energy mix, but it is already there. When you look to the long-term energy planning in Brazil, it is very, I would say, clear that all the energy sources will benefit from the growth of the economy when it resumes growth, because we are not at the stage of per capita consumption as other countries such as the US. So all the energy sources will have room to be developed in a profitable manner. So there is no doubt, again, that energy transition is here to stay, that we will see further development of renewable sources, that we will see gas development, which is, by the way, needed to support the growth and to have energy sources or renewable sources in a secure way in our power grid. So we should have more gas, more natural gas in our baseload in order to provide the growth of the renewable sources. And so for the ones that love energy and love investing in energy, definitely come to Brazil, because you can choose among, all the different sources and do it in a profitable way. So what we have really to reinforce is something that was mentioned both by Decio and Elizabeth, is everything that it has to have with our environment, and not environmental, the sense of our green, but of the environment where investments occur. So our regulatory and institutional framework has to be one that provides predictability and enough, I would say, clarity among rules to support long-term investments. So with that, I hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you. Well, Clarissa said it extremely well. We would totally agree that Brazil is going to remain in all of the above energy sector that uses a wide variety of sources, but we see the same thing Clarissa sees, which is that renewables are going to continue to grow from what is already an extremely large base if you factor in large hydro. And we do see some growth potentially in nuclear as well. We were very happy to hear from Electronuclear recently, just this past week, that they are actually going to move forward, and Eletrobras will be financing the first phase of the restart of the Angra 3 project. That's the half-built nuclear reactor up at that site. So that's very promising. They seem to get that started. So we're very eager in that area and to see U.S. companies engaged. So we do think that will be a big part, but there is no question that solar in particular and wind increasingly, along with biomass, are going to be huge contributors to the energy sector in Brazil. And although the auctions for electricity generation were canceled because of the situation right now, I think everyone needs to keep in mind that the last auctions that were held in the past year actually have a lot of new projects coming online. And they will be coming online over the next 2 to 3 years. And there are many, many solar projects in that cadre, and wind and biomass in addition to gas. So that is the direction we see going. We actually conducted a study, again, through NRAIL. This past year, we did it in conjunction with the Energy Climate Partnership of the Americas and the the OAS, the Organization of American States. And it's a study of what the potential for 4 key countries in Latin America is, Brazil being one of them, for using gas to support the integration of renewables into their systems. And Brazil has a very, very high potential. There's no question, but gas and other sources, particularly distributed generation, are going to be needed, particularly for the isolated areas. And let's not kid ourselves, there are a lot of them in Brazil. Particularly in the Amazon area. The last thing I want to talk about is large hydro. Large hydro has always been extremely important for Brazil. Everybody knows that. But we are looking at ways to help them with what they see as increased variability of their hydro capacity. And so we are looking to work with them further on that because large hydro is important, increasingly important in countries that are moving to renewable energy because it is extremely flexible as a baseload source.
Everything was said. I just would like to add that in addition to our variety of sources of energy, we will see increase in as Clarissa said, in the presence of natural gas as in the base load. We will see increase in solar. I myself, I have a solar system at home. We'll see wind, but without natural gas in the base load to guarantee the system, especially when the intermittence is high, we are not secure. So it's necessary that we have natural gas power plants running in the base load, and especially natural gas power plants replacing old diesel oil or fuel oil fire power plants that we have, especially in the north, in the northeast. Elizabeth said about the need to have distributed energy in the north, and I would add, especially to replace usage of diesel oil to generate electricity in Amazonas, Pará, and some of the northern states.
Well, I think summarizing what you all said, especially Clarissa, I would say that Brazil is positioned where the world would like to be. I mean, when it comes to electrical matrix, when it comes to energy matrix, we are really very well positioned, but we still have some ways to go. Now, I have my last question to you. In view of this serious pandemic situation, what kind of, I'd like to take 1, 2, or 3 suggestions from our distinct panelists. What would be your suggestion to Brazil, government level, I mean, regulator level, consumer level, wherever? What would be a 2 or 3 suggestions that the Institute of the America could take right after the pandemic? What do you think that is the most important action you would suggest Brazil should take? Now I'm going to start with the gentleman, Decio, then Elizabeth and Clarissa, you close down, okay?
That's easy, one and quick. No, to keep up the good work that was done during the past few years.
So I think it's the idea of taking the lemons that we've been given with COVID and turning it into lemonade as we stay in the United States, right? So taking this pause in the electricity auctions, this pause in the offshore oil auctions, and taking a hard look at what needs to be done in this period to make those auctions even more successful in the future when they come back online in the next year. And I think in order to do that, Brazil needs to take a hard look at itself, and I agree with Decio. They need to continue the hard and excellent work that people like Decio were pursuing until just recently, and are still pursuing. And I think it is incumbent on the partners of Brazil to continue to work with them and then provide them with as much capacity and assistance as possible to figure out the best way to attract the kind of investors and the kind of economic growth in the sector that they want. And so I think we view this as a really good opportunity to lay the groundwork for moving quickly forward when we're out of this COVID. We're out of the COVID period and we're back into a growth period.
Sorry, thank you. So I have the benefit to be the last one, so I can, pick up some ideas from both you guys. So no doubt that we have to keep the good work that has been done, and of course make sure that all the advancements obtained are not interrupted or reversed. But in addition to that, what I would also suggest is really simplify whatever can be simplified from now on, guaranteeing that we keep the best social and environmental standards in Brazil. Brazil has to be seen as an easy place to do business, an attractive one, but absolutely committed to the environment, to our social reality, and to the best governance practices that are in place in other places in the world. And finally, I would also very much like to suggest that we don't forget that people and lives come first, and that science is key to provide all the insights and to secure all the advancements that are needed, both in the oil and gas industry, in the energy industry as a whole, but to keep our lifestyle and our well-being safe. So this would be some of the advices I would like to give to our government.
Excellent. I want to thank you very much. I would like to thank the audience as well. I think we had 1 hour of a really very good and deep conversation. It was my great pleasure to be the coordinator, the moderator of this panel. And now I hand over to Jeremy Martin so that Jeremy can make the final words. And again, thank you, the two ladies and Decio, very, very much for your very good job. Okay, Jeremy, please.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Beth. Great to see you. Decio, thank you. Thank you, Clarissa. I'm not going to let you off the hook just yet because by my clock, we've got 3 minutes. So how about 3 more questions? Real quickly. Beth, let's start with you. There was a question about the U.S.-Brazil biofuel accord, which received obviously a great deal of attention, let's say 10 years or so ago. Just real quickly.
I remember.
Just quickly update us and tell us where that fits in the new agreement.
Yeah, I remember. I was at the Treasury Department at the time, and we were even involved in it. So obviously Brazil is very, forward, advanced in biofuels, both the production and the consumption of them in their own economy, and so they're a real leader. The United States also, although we have a very different kind of a biofuel sector than Brazil does, particularly when you look at feedstock. But also in other areas. And so most of our work on biofuels has really moved to the international multilateral level now. So a lot of the beginning of the work that we started around in the Bush administration, actually, in 2010, has moved forward and has been developed and is now really an integral part of a variety of fora, but particularly the Clean Energy Ministerial, where we work very closely not only with Brazil, but with Canada and several other countries. It's voluntary. You sign up to participate in specific pillars. There is one on biomass and biofuels, and we do work with Brazil there. That particular group is working on things like biojet, which is looking at developing biofuels for jets, which is going to be very important, and for other advanced forms of biofuels. We also work through Mission Innovation, which is a sister to the SEM, which is another international effort. Both of these came out alongside the Paris negotiations for climate, and they're also looking at advanced biofuels in that respect as well. Most of the work that my department does on biofuels, to be honest with you, is about the technology and advanced research and experimentation and sources. So the Department of Energy, to the extent that it works on this issue, is very much involved in looking at much more advanced biofuels, looking at algae and things like that. And those are areas that we can work together.
No, that's great, and there's obviously a whole lot more to discuss on that as alternative fuels. But let me throw one question to Decio and one to Clarissa. Clarissa, we'll start with you. If you could comment and just help us understand. We talked a lot about the natural gas accord and the fact that obviously it's stalled in Congress and Congress isn't meeting. When Congress resumes, a question from the audience: which states are leading the way, or which states are efforting the approval of the new gas model for Brazil? If you could answer that, and then I'll come to Decio for another one.
Yeah, of course, Jeremy, thank you for the question. As a matter of fact, Congress has not stopped. So sorry if I misled your interpretation. Congress is still working, but dedicated to, I would say, prioritary measures targeting COVID assistance. And in parallel, the legislative power at the state levels is also working. So we have a few states advancing the gas legislation. Rio de Janeiro state was the first one to regulate this issue. We have the state of Sergipe also advancing all this question in the northeast region of Brazil. And very recently in the north region of Brazil, the state of Amazonas also trying to implement new rules for the development of its gas market. So basically, states where the gas supply is supposed to be abundant and where development would make sense at a higher speed than other ones. So just to name a few, those are the three most advanced in implementing gas reforms.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying and adding those. Makes obvious good sense. So final reminder to join the polling question, which will also be my question to Decio. So there was a comment or question in the discussion during the course of this panel is the pre-salt competitive at the $30 to $35 barrel? I think we heard Clarissa, if I'm not mistaken, say $30 a barrel break even. Decio, this is the famous La Jolla conference yes or no question. Is the pre-salt competitive at $30 to $35 a barrel? And then everyone in the audience gets to vote on this too, and I'll show you the results while you just after you finish your answer.
Do you want the short, the long, or both answers?
We have a break scheduled after this, so I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, so I start with the short one. Of course it is. And now the long one. Before I joined the agency, I used to hear that the pre-salt break-even was in the range of $55, $50, $60 a barrel. I remember the first offshore technology conference I went to in Houston, 2017. Petrobras made a presentation, say that the Libra project, which was the big project they had at that time, they were aiming at break-even at $35 a barrel. 2 months later, I went to the World Petroleum Congress in Istanbul, and I was in a panel with Patrick Pouyanné, the CEO of Total. And then Patrick said that he believed that the pre-salt break-even will be in the range of $20 a barrel. It was a surprise for me, I admit. The latest number I heard from Petrobras on Libra was 29. And the end of 2019, Petrobras made a report saying that the break-even in the pre-salt was in the $25 range, and they aim to be in the $21 range. So a few more numbers. Lifting cost, without considering leases or royalties. The latest numbers I heard from Petrobras very recently, $2.9 a barrel. This is really amazing. It's a result of technology, a result of investment, a result of expertise. So it's very, very competitive, and will be even more competitive in the future.
Thank you very much. Now let's see what the audience thought. So we posed that same question. We didn't ask about the barrel range, but we said, is the pre-salt competitive? I think our entire panel and probably everyone dialing in from Brazil will be very happy. Well, maybe that's why these results are so skewed. Maybe everyone's dialing in from Brazil. But listening to the numbers Decio just cited, I think supports why 65% of the participants in our audience in the poll do agree. Yes, the pre-salt is competitive. 35% naysayers, they doubt the competitivity of the pre-salt. Like I did last time Decio spoke at La Jolla, I'll invite him back in 2 more years to update us and whether the contractual obligations were met, whether the lifting costs or whether the cost of the barrel have gone down to 21, et cetera, et cetera. Beth, good luck. Congratulations to the United States and Brazil on the Beth. Awesome.
The U.S. Beth.
U.S. Beth. I'm glad. You know what? I didn't even know that when I asked you to join this panel. So I feel very much affirmed in the wiseness of my choice. Clarissa, again, thank you, and thank you to Cynthia and your colleagues at CEBRI for your help in organizing this. This has been great. Nelson, Narciso, thank you very much. I'm sorry to belabor the panel. I know you're very precise with timing. Sorry. The 5 extra minutes is completely my fault. Have a wonderful rest of your morning, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see everyone again. We're not done with Brazil. We're going to have the Secretary of Petroleum, Biofuels, and Natural Gas, Jose Mauro Coelho, on a one-on-one with me at 10 o'clock San Diego time. So join us then. Until then, thank you. Enjoy your coffee break.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.